There you go.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to do an analysis of the Costa Gavras film Z, which won Best Foreign Language Film in 1969.
Well, in 1970 for 69.
So won the 1969
Yes, right.
Best Foreign Film, like who really cares? But it's award. The award is the 1969 film for Best Foreign Language Film. The awards are always the following year. That is correct. Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah,
all right.
That was me.
Yes. So, for that, I will allow you to to identify who the main character is. Okay, no. All right, let's start with something we can do. The overall story. What anybody want to give a sort of a real quick sense of what the overall story is about? Right.
There's a murder attempt on a left-wing politician and the investigation into what happened.
Not an attempt.
No.
He dies.
Oh, he dies.
They take the whole movie to prove that, though.
Yes, no, he dies.
Yes, there was an assassination of a politician and the investigation into what happened.
In the context of a country that is
Greece.
Is it Greece? Yeah.
Well, it's an analogy for Greece, a metaphor for Greece. Okay. Yeah.
Right. With the overall context of the left versus right conflict, struggle.
Leftist politician. He was a senator.
He was a senator. Yeah, he was a politician. And they were talking about how he's, there was dialogue in the subtitles that said
that he was going to get elected next.
Yeah, he's good looking, and he's, somebody thought he was going to get swept into office. Maybe the photographers who talked about that.
So the conspiracy to cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now it's your turn. Who's the main character?
All right, I have a couple of not theories, but at least observations.
Okay.
I mean, there's clearly a protagonist who emerges. All right, who is the judge? Okay, he seems to be the one driving. Right.
Third of the way, not almost half-ish of the way into it. But yeah.
When the plot kind of solidifies into here's the story goal.
Right.
The judge seems to be the protagonist. But I don't even know what his name is. They
just refer to him as the judge.
Yeah, we don't know anything about.
And that's
so what was that?
The magistrate.
The magistrate.
The magistrate.
Magistrate. Okay.
In French.
Well, translated, it was the juge d'instruction is magistrate in English.
Right, but I think they refer to him in the subtitles as the judge. But I mean, that's a really good indication that he is not a subjective character,
right?
Because he's known by his role, and that's a good way to identify your objective characters.
But here's the thing: the person I felt the most emotion, the most empathetic with, was the widow. But she only had a few beats. There certainly was not it wasn't even close to a full through line. But it's almost if you were looking at this and go, okay, we need more feeling in this movie. We need more emotion. Who do we focus on to bring out that emotion? We'd want to focus on the, I think on the wife of.
I think the emotion could have come out of the political struggle, as opposed to the conspiracy. I'm not saying it did, but I don't know.
I don't think that's there.
I don't either.
But I think that they certainly, there are lots of places it could have been. And there are lots of personal moments.
Yeah.
For the,
for the wife, but also the
senator, the wife.
The rally organizers at the beginning.
Right.
The one guy in particular who had a very distinctive look, who seemed.
The one who jumped off the seventh or fell from the seventh story.
No,
the other one.
The other one actually.
Oh, the other one.
Is the one who I felt had. I felt that there was some emotional connection
Well, he was sort of conscious. He was trying to
Yeah.
like, let's keep it even. Let's not ratchet it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was also very, proactively trying to move forward.
Oh
with
yeah.
His,
Yeah.
know,
No, he was
with
part of
their
the.
rally
He
and-
was absolutely part of the team. One of the leaders, but not. But he was not the gung ho one.
Right, but he was the one who went running after the woman. I guess
At the end.
toward the end. Yeah.
Well, he went to run to tell the wife the good news, quote unquote. Right.
Yeah. And so I
Which of course really shows that was
God.
not a very sensitive thing to do.
It's like he's still alive.
But he's not.
and again, there are some possible emotional themes that could have been explored there within that relationship, if the authors had chosen to explore that. So I think there is some latent potential there. They just didn't pursue it.
Okay, so anybody else have a suggestion for a main character or an influence character, or what the key relationship might be at this moment?
Can I try?
Sure, absolutely. Huh?
Uh,
Well, he wants to let him try.
I still think that the judge would be the main character because he starts out being someone who's very suspicious of the opposition, and during the course of the investigation, his point of view on the government that he represents changes.
I would argue against that. I think his understanding of the events changes.
Mhm.
But even when he's presenting it, at each time he's saying these are just the facts. There's no judgment. Although the closest thing we do get to judgment from him is that he does start calling it a murder or an assassination.
But there's also the point where he suspects that they're all communists at the beginning of the story, and he always jumps to that conclusion. Oh, they must be communists. Communists? Oh yeah, they must be communists. And at the end of the story, he's no longer believing that.
Okay. All right. So we'll put the. I'm not sure. I think that's as the protagonist, he's the one his job is to sort of unravel the mystery.
That's clear, but I mean, who else is there?
Well, just because we want it to be there doesn't mean it's there.
Right.
And the reason I picked this was it was suggested by someone, as well as it's a really well thought of and historically well-known film.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it's a grand argument story. Especially when you realize it's an allegory, or a very thinly disguised allegory for real events.
Mm.
So in that instance, you're trying to tell a real event story without actually saying the real names and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really worry about the story elements so much, except to make sure it keeps it interesting. But I don't really know so much about what happened to that Greek government, but I suspect it probably went something similar to this. Okay, but we can put the judge in here. But the thing is, do we know anything personal about the judge? Anything about what he thinks? Not about what he thinks of others, but what actually is, something that he's bringing to this that's of a concern to him?
Well, his father was the chief of police or something like that, and he was brought up in a world of justice.
Okay, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean that's about it.
So we have a reference point. Yeah, I mean I think that's the only backstory we have on him, and it does it is a logistical part. It's part of the logistical argument. Why would this individual continue to pursue when clearly the powers that be, including the #1 judge or prosecuting attorney in the country, is telling him to look the other way, and here's how you can get out of it, where you get something good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he still goes, brings them all up. Okay, and in that case, there's no influence character. There's really nobody, no foil, certainly not, or no group per se, because the baddies are the baddies, and they're not,
Again, sorry, wouldn't the opposition be the influence character? They defy all the cliches that are presented to them by being pacifists and not communists. They never do anything that would lead them to be subversive at any point in time. They refuse, and they're kept. Now that's why there's always those discussions in the hospital about, no, we cannot do certain things because it would lead to worse things. So they're always, they're remaining the course. I mean, they're very much a steadfast influence character.
Well, see, here's the problem with when most of the story is objective story, they're all steadfast characters.
Yeah.
I mean, the overall story, nobody changes. It's because they have their functions, and that they do what they do because they have their sort of their part in the puzzle. So just because they don't change, doesn't necessarily, there's no growth there though. It's not like
temptation. There's a great deal of temptation for them to do so. The guy who gets chased by the car in the park is the one who's always saying, let's revolt, let's take up arms, let's use this.
Yeah, he's still saying the same thing. He's still blaming the blame and pointing the fingers, and you could easily see him making the conversation, the points that he made at the end to the judge, magistrate, right at the beginning, about the opposition, about the right-wing side. So I'm not sure it's a. I don't think they represent a perspective. They could have. It clearly could have been told that way, and there is a. I think it's more thematic than it is perspective. I think thematically there's an argument, and I think we'll find probably a good portion of the thematics that are going to be consistent in the story.
Right.
Probably not when you get into much of the dynamics, especially the character dynamics, because I just don't know if we're gonna find it.
No, I think that's a thematic argument taking place within the objective story.
Yeah,
it's the right versus left. It's the
Well, let me then pop off of this, and let's just go to outcome, success, or failure. Well, let's try and get the thing. Go for the. Well, what is the goal?
I think the goal. I think the goal was to bring a better government to this place.
Well, what do you think that?
Well, here's where I'm basing that on. At the rally, they talk about how the doctor / the senator is going to be elected next election. At the end, when the guy runs to tell the wife, he says, "Everyone's out. We're finally going to get the government we've been trying to get."
Okay. I don't think that's what the goal is, though. The goal is
to prosecute.
Was it a murder or not?
Who's responsible for killing the? Remember, it's the logistical argument, not the emotional one. It's the logistical argument. So I think, do they solve the crime or not?
Yes,
they do. Bringing justice isn't the part of it.
Got it.
They have to solve the crime, and it's solved and it's exposed.
Yeah.
And so we have success. Now, the story judgment. This is where that scene you're talking about, and everything that happens after that scene falls into it. And this is one of the things that Melanie and I have talked about for a long time. Melanie tends to look at story judgment, which is why it's not main character judgment, really being as part of the overall story. The main character is usually the one I find that is the one that really is focused on, especially through modern storytelling. But especially if you don't have a main character, you will absolutely, that's the place to look for it. And so that's why you see that reaction that she has, who gives us an indication of the emotional side of things, the wife, as well as the results of what happened, and the fact that that good happy ending didn't come about because they had a junta and the military took over, and all the things that they were fighting for were basically banned. So nobody's really happy about that. Things are not resolved, and that's it's not a matter of being happy. It's are the sort of the emotional, is the inequity gone? No, the inequity is not gone.
Right.
That the goal was achieved, but the inequity is not gone. So that's why it would be a success bad.
Yeah.
So it's a personal tragedy. It worked out. It worked out okay, but nobody's happy about the results.
Right.
And that seems to be consistent with what the story the feel of the story.
Well, they won the battle but lost the war.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
But sometimes, it's like having a Pyrrhic victory. You can win, but not be okay with how it, the cost could be so high, which is essentially what a Pyrrhic victory is.
Right.
All right. Time lock or option lock?
Option lock. Well, they have to figure out who was responsible, so they go through the potential stories.
The suspects. They have to eliminate all the suspects and all the.
But I think also the stories that the suspects are in.
Yeah. I mean, there are a certain number of steps, and you have to get all the ducks in a row, and it slowly starts to form until he kind of outlines it at the end. He says, you look at it this way, it's not working, but if you look at all these other things, everything fits together.
Right.
It's like, that's when it hits the crisis point. And that's when you have sort of all the results. That's what a hard cut to him running through the olive orchards to tell, the senator's widow. It's just like he was alive. It's like, wow, that was pretty insensitive. Okay, story drivers, success, action or decision. Do actions drive decisions? Decisions drive actions, and how do we know?
Well, I think actions drive decisions.
Okay, so it's
the actions I can think of are mainly he arrives, but then he's murdered or he's attacked. I guess he hasn't died yet. The ending is the action of indicting everybody.
Right.
Okay. So
yeah, they said that was where I was a little. Are the indictments considered an
See,
action
the
or a
ending
decision?
would have been all of that resolving in a re-election of the new government, but then the story gets truncated because chaos enters, there's a coup, and military take over.
Right.
So they basically break structure, which is again part of the real world. Real world doesn't always fall into nice little convenient packages, because if it was a story, they would have been happy, and it would have been a nice democracy, or certainly the less right wing. But we don't see that. But the action would have been that the event that closed it, which ended up being a different action than was expected, but it definitely closed the story. There's no story after that.
You're saying in a grand argument story there would have been an election? Wouldn't the assassinations and the junta also have been an action that?
Right, but it wasn't. The story was not. It was built up to be a happy ending.
Okay.
Structurally, it's a happy ending. It's a success story.
Yeah. And then
and actually, it's structurally a happy ending, but by breaking structure and having chaos step in, which just sort of, because there was no discussion of any of that as part of the story. it just sort of comes in from left field and says, "Okay, we're taking over."
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, but there was still, you know, there was still. It's not there weren't any indications or any sort of pressure coming from that side where it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't completely unpredictable.
No, it's not that it's, well, okay, within that world it was unpredictable because there were no forewarnings, right? You kind of need to indicate something's going to happen. You know, it was like, oh, and then the earthquake hit. Okay, well, that kind of put an end to whatever we were doing because we're in something else now. Now that's how real world works. You know, things happen that are, you know, just sweep up and or push away everything else, and doesn't matter what was going on, it breaks structure. So, and since this is based on a true story, you can kind of give it to the, you know, it's like, okay, well, crap happens, right? You know, that's sure, if we were looking back at the whole country and seeing really what was going on in the palace and all that stuff, this in the military, because we didn't see the military at all. We only saw the judicial branch and the police. We didn't see the military. I mean, although a lot of those police had a lot of military type medals. So, and there was a colonel. I mean, he was one. But so the idea though is that it doesn't. It's not a complete surprise because we understand how that kind of world works, but we didn't get that from inside the story. That was my point. But it does definitely seem to be action driven. You know, if you were making the judge the main character, it would be pretty easy to see what his dynamics would be. I mean, he's a doer.
Right. Linear. Linear?
Huh?
Yeah.
He's pretty linear.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say he probably is a change character. Right. You know, but it's just really, you know, it's hard. I mean, it's not even sure if he's a doer because of the fact that he just is a receptor for it. But that's sort of his job. You know, when someone's doing their job, that's not a personal thing.
Even if they're tricking someone?
Pardon?
Even if they're tricking someone?
If it's part of their job, you know, if you're doing, there's nothing more boring than watching someone doing their job.
Right.
Unless it's a completely unusual job you've never seen before and it's got some really interesting things going on. Which usually why those kinds of people doing their jobs are usually mysteries because it's clearly there's something that needs to be figured out. And that's what's interesting, not them doing their job. You know, and thank God they concatenated all those interviews because that would have been really, really dumb. I mean, that's the point. But you don't want to follow a sleuth on a normal, boring stakeout. You want it when things go bad, when it's not working out, not when it is working out. All right. So, for the overall story, where do we see what domain do we think it might be in, and why?
I think it might be OS manipulation because it's all about deceiving and lying to people and trying to get them to see it your way.
Okay.
I could also see it as an activity, but I'm going to stick with manipulation.
I would suggest fixed attitude.
Okay, and
the reason why is you have the left, the right. You have people chanting "Long live the bomb." You have other people chanting disarmament. You have clashes of opinions, but then everyone remains staunch in their own personal, in their own space, in their own point of views.
Well, I think
that is what causes the conflict, isn't it?
It's the world before the assassination attempt, or before the attack, because realistically, the beginning is a setup, It's just to introduce us to the world of this and to set up some backstory so that when the attack happens, we know enough about things so that, I mean, once the attack happens, the story moves forward, and it's less about the attitudes at that point. Although there's a lot of issues about it. Are you a labeling?
Right.
But I think that's more of a labeling, like, you know, we have in the manipulation domain, we have playing a role. It's being, and, you know, rather than it being, I am playing a role, it's almost like I'm putting you in this role to play. I'm casting you as this kind of a person, and you as this kind of a person. And I think you see a lot of people doing that, you know, saying, you know, it's the labeling, and because if it was a fixed attitude story, the goal would be something along the lines of, you know, whose ideology is better than the other. And this one is really about who can hide or manipulate people better, the justice system or the perpetrators of this crime.
That's interesting.
Because that's really where the conflict is. You know, it's when people are pressured, you know, they do things because they're pressured to do it, not because of what they believe in, but because, you know, I know, you know, I know where your brother-in-law works for the government. You know, it's like there was clearly a threat, but it's a manipulative type of a threat. It's not a physical threat, and it's not because he's a lefty. It's just, I can get him fired, or I can get, you know, or I can get you a permanent ID, or, you know, all of those. I mean, look at the perfect example is that doofus, who's the other perp, the one who hit him, who goes into the newspaper and says, "Print my name, take my picture." Print my name. It's like, wow, is this guy dumb? And he's like, "Oh, I have a disguise on. I have glasses." Get my name out of there, and, you know, maybe it's not a good idea. You think? You know. I mean, those are the kind of dysfunctional thinking where, what are you thinking? You know, why are you doing this? This is completely ridiculous. And even the entire opening weird segment where they're using the analogy of the mold on vines as the cancer of communism or whatever. But it's not even communism. They're just talking about sort of leftist free thinking. You know, anything that's a right of fascism. I mean, because they loved everybody into that group. Yeah, it was very interesting. That's all this. You know, what kind of thinking are you? This is a really weird way to look at the world, you know. And it's not what he thinks; it's just sort of how. You know,
how does that not work with contemplation? I'm just curious. How is contemplation different
than
playing a role in the sense that you presenting it now?
Oh, well, okay. Those are two different things. Contemplation is literally considering something, thinking about it. You know, think about this, think about that. Oh, we're not going to think about this. We're not going to think about that. Which is why it's more in the fixed attitude.
Right.
I want to, you know, blinders. I won't even think about that. Or you have to think about this. You know, that's the consideration kind of discussion.
Okay, so it's not more like a bias.
The role is, I mean, if you think of, instead of putting it in political terms, put it in theatrical terms, is that, you know, you're a second-class player and I am a star, and you're, you know, all this kind of labeling of who people are by, you know, these roles, that you can see how it caused conflict, and they don't agree with you. It's like, no, I am the star and you're just you're a stagehand, and, you know, You're an usher, you know. So it's kind of like that's where the playing a role thing, where it's not like a main character who's dealing with it personally, but where you're dealing with it objectively. That's how playing a role can come in.
Understood.
And then you know, you even have, you know, mistaken identity, a little bit of that, which is, you know, that's part of manipulation too. But that's a really weak one. But you see it that one the one scene where the judge accuses him of being a communist.
Yeah.
You know, as a way to get him to basically reveal exactly the opposite, that he's a card-carrying fascist. You know, if that's not manipulation, I don't know what is.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
But are you arguing for also then? Are you flat out arguing for playing a role? As the
No, not at all. I just think that was there was that was in there.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Wasn't trying to make. I don't think that that's. I think that's what necessarily the goal is. Because it seemed, you know, the first act seemed more like that developing a plan type thing.
Right.
Sort of, but it's not, you know, whether or not that's part of the story.
Because I felt like the goal might have been when he was inviting everyone. I was like, oh, this is developing a plan. He's seen the plan. He was able to uncover the plan. He put it together, and I was wondering if that was going to be sort of the goal.
I mean, that to me feels a little bit better, just because I think also with that you've got both groups are working on trying to develop a plan that's going to make things work in their favor. You know, at the beginning,
right?
And then once the event happens, then the story shifts into, you know, who done it and why did they do it and who's involved, and the plan, you know, as you see, it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And he even says at that one point, he says, I came in looking, and when I look at this how things fit together this way, doesn't really work. But when I look at these other things, it sort of that's why I kept on saying these are just the facts. And he said it's developed here this way, and it developed this way, and it developed into here, and this developed, and it's like, you know, this growing and growing and growing beast. And then, you know, oh, here's what's going on. Yeah. I mean, that I don't even know what the offhand what the issues are under that.
So they feel good to me. That's the thing. State of being, situation, circumstances, and sense of self.
Well, for the record, I was going to pick fixed attitude also for the same reasons he stated. Who's on?
Jerome.
Yeah, I at least my initial thinking was in complete agreement with what you said, just because it seems like it's the meta conflict of the left versus right ideology seems to be the underlying cause for everything that's going on.
But they don't argue the thing is, they don't argue what they believe in. The closest thing is that thing at the beginning, but they really don't. They're not arguing what the belief is. That's the problem with that is that if they said we believe X, Y, Z, I mean, you have the down with the bomb, you know, but that's not. But that's where they are. Just so we know what the two groups are, but that's really a non-issue the rest of the movie.
Right, but the other thing is that what really jumped out at me was the quad of truth, falsehood, evidence, and suspicion as being the thematic element. It's really that group, you know, really seemed to be strong.
Well, now let's say our magistrate was the main character. He would fit really well there, because he's the one who's concerned with everybody's memories. This is not personal though, but he's the one who's having, you know, seeing all these memories and people. Oh, I remember they were here from, and all these things that just aren't, you know, truth and falsehood. And I mean, you see him in that a lot of the stuff that he's doing. He seems to be evaluating things that way, which is where I think that the story works as well as it does, and as engaging as it does, is I think it addresses a lot of the chart but not the perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So it's making an argument, but it's making it kind of like from one
Side of the prism.
one side of
Yeah.
one frame of reference.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Mhm.
like it's taking it as if it's presenting everything as if it's objective,
As
if it is objective,
right.
which doesn't give the audience the satisfaction of the personal side of things,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't feel like it's missing a lot. I mean, it feels like it's got a lot of the argument is there. Not that it couldn't be been made stronger or better, which I think if it had the other perspectives, it would have. But I mean, if you focus it primarily on, it's kind of like if you just took, rather than almost as if you just took the past understanding, memories, and developing a plan, that seems like it's the story.
Mm-hmm.
So
you got equity, inequity, you got order, chaos.
Right. So it's kind of like I'm
those
objectifying the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really taking a typical slice of the model. I'm going to take a quadrant,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to look at everything from a single perspective of a quadrant.
Mm-hmm.
So a single structural view as opposed to a personal or character view. And that's why, because you see those other parts in there pretty clearly, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not necessarily act orders. So it's a different way of looking at putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
But because the other stuff I don't really see a whole lot of.
Other stuff, what?
Oh, like obtaining. Was there a big thing on obtaining? No. I mean, there was no act that was about obtaining from any context.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, what would have been really interesting if they wanted, because there was a moment when the words popped into my head, Eva Perón, where it's like it's a relationship between the woman and the people, especially when they did the Z in the street. It really felt like that potentially could have been the emotional argument.
Oh, right. They were flirting with a main character all along, but they never chose one.
Right. But yeah. And I felt like that could have even been, where the impact character was the public,
It could have been. Yes.
It could have been. Yeah.
So that's why I said when the junta, the coup happened, it came out of the blue because we didn't see any of the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it feels to me it's like it's this weird, one of the things we talk about with short stories where you can do, you can slice or chunk, and you can sort of, rather than taking a layer, you can sort of take a vertical slice. Well, this is like taking a vertical slice, but from each of the same making a quad of those quadrants,
Mm-hmm.
but not exploring them sequentially. I'd have to look at it more. I mean, theoretically, that's completely okay with Dramatica because that's another quad.
Right.
It's a quad where everything's very, very similar. It's all sort of referencing from the same base,
Mm-hmm.
with slight difference.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's kind of like having a quad that's made up of situation, activity, fixed attitude, and manipulation, and the concerns are the past, understanding, memories, and developing a plan.
Right.
Which, it's sort of like, okay, it's a little sort of warped view of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got that. I mean, fate, destiny, prediction, and addiction. And again, that you could talk about that in terms of.
But you have the leftists talk more about that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And yeah,
exactly.
And that. So there is a certain kind of impact character energy there. It just wasn't specifically assigned.
But it's not. It's not a perspective so much
Mm-hmm.
as it's a frame of reference, structural frame of reference. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it would have, had they had expanded it out, it would have been a lot more compelling. But I think you would have gotten into, from Costa Gravis, in terms of what he was trying to do, he's trying to basically reveal a truism about an event that no one can talk about in his country, legally. And so he's making a film that's about this other country that's really not specifically mentioned, and you know,
right, because according to IMDb, it was an Algerian film,
right?
But they never really said Algeria or really identified the country.
No,
within the movie.
And they're all speaking French,
right?
You know, so it's not Greek.
Yeah.
You know, and again, as Mike was saying, that the biggest clue as to where it's from with the Z is being the political reference to, what was the guy's name?
No, it just means he is alive in Greek.
Oh, and that was after this event in Greece, that
right.
became sort of a,
it was a
everybody was
graffiti
writing
that
it.
people would put up, and then it became specifically illegal to use the letter Z as graffiti after the Junta took over,
Oh, wow.
and
so
that sort of thing.
So this happened in the 60s?
Yes.
A life of conviction.
well,
Well, how
Now
did you
before
search
the movie. The movie
Yeah.
was 69.
Right.
so is there?
Or 70 according to this one.
What, I'm not sure where else we can go with this. Because I mean, I think I like certainly the where the elements are. You know, you've got perception, reality, inequity, equity, change, or order, chaos, change, inertia. I mean, these are all really key pieces to what's going on here. But I don't think I mean, you certainly have change and inertia. There's inertia is a biggie. You know, it feels like inertia.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
What else?
Awareness, self-awareness. Knowledge, thought, desirability.
I think also perception. There's a lot of perception.
Yeah.
They're trying to manipulate how people see it, or an actuality.
Oh, yes, yeah. So, you know, we see a lot of that being treated, you know, pretty directly. You know, sort of, they talk a lot about a lot of this stuff.
There's a lot of interdiction.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's. I have to think a lot about how that story form would look, but I think it feels more like it's just all those yellows, you know, that they developing a plan, memory, and understanding of past.
Yeah, even the memories, like a couple times with the doctor and his wife early, they have these memories,
right?
You know, and it was like it felt very disconnected from the movie.
Right, but it was subjective.
It was subjective.
You know, it was like, oh, we're staying in their shoes, and you know, constantly memory flashbacks.
Yeah, and that all went away.
Right.
Sort of like they had an instinct there that, but the sort of the demands of the
demands of the real events,
right,
kind of just sort of dictated what could and couldn't happen.
A movie that I had a similar reaction to watching was Contagion by Soderbergh.
Oh, right, because it was sort of presented like this is real life.
Yeah, and I know it drew on a couple real life things, and I'd be curious now I don't actually want to watch the movie again.
That's a big indicator that it's not a grand argument story.
Yeah, but it'd be interesting to see if someone else wants to go see it. It does a similar thing.
Yeah, I think that would be a situation. Well, certainly, there seems to be much more situational on that. But then you have a couple of characters that you identify with, but of course, most of them don't live long enough to.
Right. Right.
You say, "Oh no, okay, goodbye." I just got emotionally invested, and they're dead. This is not a first, but it's this is a very unusual because if you even did an American style documentary, they generally fall into a nice grand argument story.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to say something more like the audience is the main character.
I don't think so.
Not, right?
I don't think so. I don't think this isn't supposed to sway the audience. This is an information. Which, if you notice, those are all the K quads. That's all the information, knowledge. So I think that's why it feels very informational, interesting, but informational.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the information are all the K quads. So the other three, do they?
Sort of. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the situation, activity, manipulation, that's a direct K-A-D-T.
Right. But what about information? Entertainment?
Well, that's the genre part of it. When you look at them, so a situation knowledge that's the what is it, and then
No, I know that, but I mean, like you said, since it's like all about information, but these are all knowledge. Does entertainment line up with activity?
Information is knowledge. Drama is energy. Comedy is. I'm sorry. Drama is. I think drama would be that would be ability or space. Energy is comedy, and B is entertainment. The desire is entertainment.
Thought is entertainment.
No, desire.
I'm sorry. Thought. No, entertainment is desire. What was the third one that you were saying?
Comedy.
Comedy is.
I think that's thought. So you have the opposite. You've got comedy and knowledge are like really diverse. Although I think the pairs are actually I think the pairs are information and entertainment. That wouldn't make sense. Anyway, I'm not sure about comedy and drama. My feeling is that comedy is probably energy or is probably thought, and drama is probably ability. But I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to work that out every time. I don't remember things. I have to
I just wanted some juicy information.
Well, here,
but that is the. As you go down, they get less and less of the bases because because whatever's above them is influencing them. So like filters, which is why when you look at the bottom, they almost all look alike because you've got it all sort of mixed in. But in the top, the upper left corner is the most knowledge based. The lower left corner is the most desire. The lower right corner is the most thought, and the upper right is the most ability. If you look at that, activity, doing, skill, and it says trust. Okay. In that context, in the skill, it's more of the. I don't know. I can't make a good argument for that one. Not feeling that one. But again, when you're down at the bottom, they get pretty hazy. The further away you get from the K, because it's a K-based system. It's a knowledge-based system. So the upper left corner is the base point.
Right. Can we segue off of Jim's comment of the main character being the audience?
Yes, we may. But it's a good thought. But I don't see that here.
Well, just because the other documentaries have done it.
Yeah, no. Very often, if they're persuasive, they're frequently the audience. Even something like The Big Chill, where you've got it's kind of the audience is the changed character, and the dead guy is the influence character. And all of the characters sort of represent that main character perspective collectively, with the dead guy being the steadfast character.
Yeah, because I couldn't
Alex.
get engaged in this at all.
Right. In this?
Yeah.
No, it's not emotionally engaging at all.
No.
Does the big chill, the audience is the main character, and
Well, the audience identifies with all of those characters. The audience, it's supposed to change the audience. Now, it's targeted at a very specific group of an audience, the baby boomers.
Right.
So not all audience members are going to feel that because the message is not as targeted. It's a very generational target.
Right.
But the influence character is Alex.
Okay.
And every one of those characters changes in exactly the same way.
Okay.
You know, we used to be good. We used to do this. We used to do that. And they basically they leave, sort of getting back into the, oh, I'm going to go, you know, I'm going to rejuvenate myself in whatever it is.
Right.
Lots of different sort of ways in which they're doing it, but they're all sort of going back to being what their idealism, renewing their idealism. And that's what it's supposed to do to the audience. You know, like any change character is supposed to make the audience feel that,
Right.
you know.
Right. I'm assuming this falls under propaganda. When the audience
That one is not, because they really didn't leave it. They didn't leave a hole for you to step in which case it would.
Got it.
It was more. I mean, it was much more thematically a propaganda piece because of the subject matter was targeted at a very specific, you know, the baby boomer age group. The ones that were the age of the actors that were playing those characters.
Right.
The audience that were of that generation.
Okay.
What was your segue?
Yes.
No, the segue was Kim saying that the audience was the MC. He didn't actually apply to. She didn't actually apply to this movie, but it was just a thought I'd never considered. I just wanted to.
Oh yeah, no, you can.
To Sicko.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really great podcast where it turned out the main character was the audience.
Yeah,
right.
That's often the case in documentaries. But that's a case where sort of Michael Moore served as the proxy for the audience, as the observer. You know,
Right.
So he kind of played the role of audience.
Right, and made it so that they would be changed by the end.
Right.
I like changed.
But does so by making both an objective argument and a subjective argument, both a logistical and an emotional argument. And you see that very clearly, you know, toward the end when he says, are we a me society or a we society? You know.
Yeah.
And that's how propaganda works, right? Is by leaving out parts of the story for them.
Yeah. And you have to make that part of the argument. You fill in the blanks.
And
So you become part of the argument.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay. That's what you just answered. Yeah.
Right. You have, in order to make sense of it, you have to fill it in from your own experience, which means, and if that filled in picture makes sense to you or feels right, then you have basically completed the argument that will win you and make sure that you buy it because you made it so. It's the basics of, that's really basic propaganda. But
you usually like it was your idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the way you make it your idea is you distract it by having two of them. You have the smoke and mirrors, which is where it attracts your attention, which is not really where the propaganda is supposed to be happening. That's where your attention is drawn, but the propaganda is the mirror to it. So Thelma and Louise, everybody gets to that end, and it's going, it freeze frames. So obviously we don't see them die. We don't want them to die. So how do we fill in that blank? But the thing we're not discussing is, why was that the choice that they made? Because that's really the big question. So you have to go back to what would drive the housewife and the waitress to kill themselves as opposed to go back to their husbands. You know, which goes back to, well, what was it in Texas that Thelma would not go, she would rather kill herself than go through Texas. What
They
happened?
never said it.
Don't get me started.
Well, yeah, I know. Rick Perry, that's the answer. No.
Yeah.
No, in the script, it's in there. In the movie, it's not.
What is it?
They talk about it, it's not there.
No, what is it in the script?
She was raped in the, I think it was at the sheriff's station or something. It was something, it was some really, I don't know. I'm filling in a blank that makes sense to me. It wasn't, but she was raped.
Okay.
But in the movie, where they're waiting at the train's going by, and she said, "What are you doing? Take my word for it. I am not going. You don't want to have killed the man and be in Texas." That's all she says. You know, it's like, oh, okay, then we won't go through Texas.
Oh, so it wasn't a death penalty thing.
Well, it's not. Again, you fill in a blank that makes sense to you. And the thing is, what makes sense to a man is different than what makes sense to a woman. Because this is why it's really important that it's a female mental sex main character, because the men aren't empathizing with that character, they're sympathizing with him. So they're not standing in their shoes. They're not the ones who are being told, don't leave home because this is where it's going to lead. Don't go off and have fun. Don't go off and have sex. Don't leave your husbands because this is where it's going to lead. Which is effectively what the propaganda is. Because if you say, I don't want the result, I know what the motivation is, so the alternative is don't leave. Don't go on that trip. Don't go and have your freedom. So it was a really kind of, well, let's say traditional way of looking at women's roles in Western society. But you can't say that that's what it was because they didn't say it. But all the men filled in the blank and women filled in whatever blank that they would fill in. But everybody's attention was on what happened when they went off the cliff, because that's the one that's right in your face. You know. So, and it's very effective. I mean, at the time, there were women's groups that were getting together to rewrite the meaning of the story, to try to process it, because it was pretty nasty. You know, it was pretty effective as a piece of propaganda. Men, you know, are like, oh, okay, yeah, I think that I probably would have chosen to drive off the road because they'd fill in something that would justify them.
So.
Making that choice.
I don't know if I'm being dense, but so the propaganda was to propagandize
the motivation is by leaving out the motivation, you fill in the motivation that would drive you to leave your home to go off and have fun, or leave your husband, or whatever. And by putting in your motivation, your drive, you already know what it's going to lead. So it's a cautionary tale.
Okay.
But it's a personalized cautionary tale. Because some women might not be concerned about being raped, might be concerned about something happened to their children, or something happening to, who knows?
So the propaganda is stay home?
Yes, that is the message, is to stay home or die. Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
It's amazing it was so popular, if that was the message.
It's not the overt message because it's hidden.
Because it's clever.
That's,
You think it was on
the
purpose?
word propaganda is about propagating an idea. And the way you propagate it has to have energy behind it. Because if you deliver a grand argument story, it's all wrapped up, it's all done. There's nothing to keep it moving, except for, you know, you might enjoy it, but it's resolved everything. But a propaganda is an open-ended story. It leaves something out. It's like there's a leak that is pushing it forward, and you put your finger into it. But you have to keep your finger in it in order to keep that from moving forward.
Do you think the filmmakers did that on purpose?
I don't know. The fact that it's in the script and not in the movie is a little suspect.
So it was written by
It was written by a woman,
but it was directed by
a man who may or may not have known what the effect was.
Yeah. Okay.
But he did the freeze frame at the end,
Uh-huh.
and he left out that piece of really key information. So, wittingly or unwittingly,
Right.
he. But now remember, this was the first buddy picture for women.
Mm-hmm.
So it was putting them. That's the thing is it had this sort of false advertising. It put them in this. This is a very woman empowerment movie with an extremely traditional message.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't go out and be an empowered woman, or this is what's going to get you. You know, and all the men in it are really shown very poorly,
Right.
except for the what's his name, the
Boyfriend.
no, not the boyfriend.
Brad Pitt.
No, Brad Pitt steals all their money.
No, the boyfriend, played by big guy.
Yeah, but they made all the ones who are nice are like pathetic.
Right.
They're like sad sacks.
Hmm.
You know, and that's why the one FBI guy or whoever he is who's trying to help him, he's kind of a bit of a, he's a softie, and he's ineffective, and it's like, no, don't shoot. And it's like, nobody's listening to him. Welcome to the women's world. They kind of put him in a woman's role, even though he's a guy, and so they show that you're either a very ineffective man, or you're a brute, and or a thief, or a whatever. It's just there's not any really positive male role models in that movie, which of course makes them look that much better and buddy-ier, and that's fine dramatically, but thematically it's the message is a little dubious. Yeah, propaganda is really is a there's lots of different ways of doing propaganda, and the one where you just repeat something over and over and over again, which you see in political ads all the time, and you see how effective it is. That's the K way. That's the knowledge way. You keep on making associations. You just say this knowledge, this and this, this and this, this and this, and then you don't even have to say this. Everybody just thinks that all the time. This and that, and people just think that. You don't have to. After a while, you don't even have to bring up the other. But if anybody brings up this, then they think of that, and that's just through memory. That's through training. And so that's one kind of propaganda. You're saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Right. Oh, look, there's smoke. There must be fire. Like, it's that's why I have that one chapter in the book.
I know. I always wish there'd be more about it.
Yes.
Well, maybe we can go. I have to reread it and figure it out again.
Remember what it is?
Huh?
Just read it to remember everything.
No, I don't remember it.
I know.
No, I would read it and then and then I'd probably figure out some more stuff. But yeah, it's annoying.
Oh yeah.
But it's good. So, any other questions? Okay, well, this is a short podcast. Thank you, guys. And next month we are doing
Live, Die, Eat.
Oh, all right. That'll be fun. I actually really like that movie. And I could watch that movie over and over.
I bet you could, and you probably will if you.
No, I have. I've watched it several times. Well, yeah, it's on HBO right now. It's on HBO right now. So that's one I will not start in the middle.
Yeah.
Because you haven't seen it? I'm really surprised.
I haven't seen it.
It's a very.
I've been saving it for.
Very entertaining, smart sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
I also recommend, if you haven't seen it, which you probably still won't, but I recommend Ex Machina.
Oh, it's in the theaters now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I especially if you're a really big sci-fi fan,
Mm-hmm.
it's really good hard sci-fi.
Oh. All right.
But it's an organic hard sci-fi, so it's not it's not just all technical, but it's pretty neat.
It's cybernetic.
Right, and it's got a story,
Right.
which is nice, even though there are only 3 characters.
All right. Cool. Oh.
Well, technically.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's good.
Cool.
Well, good night, guys.
Thanks.